You speak about this effort by the Saudi government to re-educate, if that's the proper word, 40,000 clerics who've somehow gone astray or who haven't yet taken up the new line. But that speaks, frankly, to such a deeply rooted problem. If 40,000 educators, clerics, have not gotten with the new program, that's a big problem, and it speaks to just how deeply rooted those attitudes seem to be in Saudi society.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, the particular version or interpretation of Islam that has dominated in Saudi society since the 18th century, this is not some new thing, has been a very intolerant version of Islam. And its intolerance, by the way, is directed at other Muslims, I repeat, not at non-Muslims. It's primarily trying to reform other Muslims and bring them back to a very distinctive interpretation of theology and of law. The state is wedded to that interpretation. It bases its legitimacy on that interpretation. So for the state to move away from it is really, frankly, a huge political and social effort. And Al-Qaeda taps into that ideology. And in so doing, has a reservoir of sympathizers, not just in Saudi, but in other parts of the Muslim world. The challenge that the Saudis face is to remain somehow faithful to Wahhabism, but get rid of the nasty bits. And that's not a challenge that, I mean, there isn't an easy answer for that, and I don't think they've reached that answer. The other thing about Al-Qaeda that should be underscored and underlined is that Al-Qaeda has not only taken on Wahhabi theology, but they've also taken on a lot of the political discourses, the political views of anti-colonial, anti-imperial movements. So that when you listen to bin Laden or to other Al-Qaeda leaders, they often are talking about the liberation of Muslims from the injustice of both local regimes but also of the West. They talk about freedom. The freedom to oppose, for instance, is a very important feature of bin Laden's message. So that Al-Qaeda's, I mean, if Al-Qaeda has been able to combine both the profound sense of humiliation that Muslims have at the injustice that they feel both vis-a-vis the West but also their own regimes, as well as this desire to purify the faith.
To what extent has Al-Qaeda been the beneficiary of the breakdown in religious hierarchies? They can exercise influence, they can incorporate some clerics, but they don't seem to be completely reliant on clerics for their message or their inspiration. Right. The leadership of Al-Qaeda seems well able to take on its own behalf certain steps or issue certain proclamations about what should and shouldn't be doing. I would imagine in an earlier time of a much more rigid and established religious hierarchy, with communications technologies not available to them, that really wouldn't have been possible. But Al-Qaeda, like organizations, can assert something on their own behalf that wouldn't have been possible 50 years ago.
That's true. I mean, there is no doubt that in the Muslim world in general, except for the Shias, but in the Sunni world, 90% of all Muslims, there has been a breakdown in religious authority. There has been a democratization of interpretation where you have new people coming up with very limited religious education, speaking authoritatively on the religion. Al-Qaeda is a product of that process, of people turning directly to texts, the texts of revelation, the Quran or Hadith, and not having to refer to older and more established authorities. But it's not unique to Al-Qaeda. Other Islamic movements have also benefited from that breakdown.